Greetings, welcome back to my podcast. Today I'm speaking about death. I'm hoping to demonstrate how this concept of death is very much part of our life story. There is always seeming death in this story. Now, after death follows a mourning period. So death and mourning are always there. Now, in case you are wondering what type of death I was speaking about, just take any idea or any concept that you can associate with death. Whether it's a passing away of a person that you have known, or the dying of a concept, dying of opportunities, the death of relationships. Nowadays you hear people saying that my relationship is dying. And when you look at this concept of death from any perspective, you can see that it's the permanent loss of life. It's the loss of life because that thing that has died, whether it's a person, whether it's something tangible or intangible, once it has died, it has vanished, disappeared from this story. So what is happening? It's the disappearance from this story. This is the death I'm speaking about. So I'll be making examples about this from my own story, of my personal experiences, how I've seen death all over this story, and I've mourned throughout the story. Okay, so the first death that I'll speak about, it's the death of me, or the self-concept, or what others would call the version of selves. So there is a version of me which was a Christian, which identified as a child of God, and from there you could see even the friends that were made, the conversations that were had in and out of church, even the dreams at night. So this identity permeated everything that I touched, every experience that I had, every interactions that I had. But at one point in my life, that whole identity shattered. That whole concept of me broke down as if it was never there. And after that, something else came out. I can't even recall if it was something new which came first before the dying, or it was the death, then something new came up, a new concept of a spiritualist, somebody who believes in spirituality rather than religion. There was that contrast. somebody who believes that as within, so is without, believes that the whole power of creation lies within them. Whoever God is within them, as them. That was the new identity. And if you had conversation with this guy now, everything was from the new perspective now, was the new person. It would seem as though you are speaking to a new person completely. You might have known this guy as he was following church, and whenever he sees you, you'll speak about Bible verses and why you should go to church with him. And now this guy is speaking a new language, something that you've never heard him speak about before. Who is this guy now? Who is this guy that I know? He's died. This is death. This is the death of the version of self. After some point, even this spiritualist that has been born known to be speaking of so much wisdom, they know him in spaces, they know him in all conversations that he has. Like, who is this guy who speaks so much wisdom, speaks the voice of ancients? Is he from different dimension from this one? At some point, even that one died, not to be born, not to be seen, no longer there. You know, I laugh at this sometimes when I am in my room and looking at the shelves and see the book that I wrote about spirituality. And this book that meant so much, that shed so much of wisdom. It's like, it's a bunch of nonsense now. So this is death of the version of selves. How many times do you die? It's the amazingness of this death, and this can be seen in different aspects of life. This is just one when you are looking at the version of selves, but you look at experiences as well, and you see them rising and they die. The same death, same passing away. You could say they die or they pass away. It's the same thing. Of course, you wouldn't say death is death because there is a funeral and there is the speeches and all of that. No. Death refers to the disappearance, the permanent loss of life, whatever you do afterwards, whether you bury that and you would understand that burying has nothing to do with what has died. It's the process that has nothing, like it's the one who died can never form the decision making of how they are going to be buried or what is going to happen in their funeral, because they are not there. They have vanished. Whether you throw their body away or whether you do whatever you do with it, they are no longer there. They are no longer part of it. So is mourning. The one who mourns is the one who remains. But whatever died is not part of the mourning process. So this is death. It almost seems as if the story of life is full of death, that without death there is no story. Because whenever there is death, it somehow means that something else is there. Thus, the continuation of a story or the advancement of a story. So, in order for the story to move forward, there have to be death. And nothing can stop death. Nothing can stop death. So there is death, whether one likes it or they don't. So there is a conversation about when one is looking for a partner, that one should also try to figure out how their partner would change after some time, because there has been a recognition that people change from one version to the next. That process of dying from one version to the next version. So that should be one of the determining factor as we agree to be together. Because if you are into business, chances are you are going to have a profitable business after some time, and you are going to have a different identity from somebody who just has an idea now. So you would be somebody else after some time. Now, here's the trick about this. These different versions, they seem to be following each other, but do they know each other? They don't. Just as I was saying, that once this one dies, it can never be part of the mourning process. the bearing process. So there is no induction in this. It seems like it's like changing a channel. One is gone, another one comes alive. And they can never communicate. Maybe that's why we write on social media asking questions. What would you say to what advice would you give to your 15-year-old self? So that's the version of yourself that died. And you wish you could say something to them. And from there, you could almost see how helpless the situation is, because there is no way a 34-year-old would speak to their 16-year-old self. There is no way. There's just no way. But there is that wish. So it's a wish that I wish what I know now, I could go back in time and implement that. So it's about the predictability of this. There is somehow a trying to predict how you're going to die, or how or when you're going to die. The fear of death. Because when you look at these different versions of self, what you identify as, and you look at the current one, the current version of self, to be honest, does this version really want to vanish? Does it want to die? It seems like there is a territory being marked here, that this one wants to dominate their existence. That is why there is always that fear. If you are doing well, there is a fear of what would happen if I'm not doing well, if I'm not making as much, if I'm not having as much. What would happen? So that is the fear generated from this version of self. No matter how well this version is doing, but there is that fear of, can I keep this? Can I keep on being this version? And the one trying to improve, if by any chance they knew that improvement would dispel them, they wouldn't, because they want to benefit from their hard work. So it's the predictability I'm speaking about. You see this in different situations, that one try to maintain a relationship, for instance. There is death of that concept as well. There is a possibility of death of that concept, or any concept. But there is the trying to maintain that, trying to keep it afloat, the working hard on it. But can we ever predict anything? No, we can't. We can't. So it also brings us to what is responsible for changing these visions, these concepts, for the killing. What is responsible for life? Is there a thing that we can point to and say this is responsible for changing these versions of self? This is responsible for maintaining these concepts. This is responsible for the movement, the activities of life. Is there anything that we can point to? Because we see this death, and no matter how trying these current versions are to remain here, but death happens. Death happens with or without the trying to stop death. So there's nothing that can stop death. And we couldn't say that these versions are the reason why death happened, because we can see clearly that they do not want to die. So why would you be responsible for bringing about death if you do not want to die in the first place? And there's nothing that we can point to and say this is responsible for death. So which brings us to say that really it's nothing that is driving everything. Now when you say nothing, people go crazy because everything must be known, right? Everything must be pointed to, everything must be defined. And I'm simply saying this is not a thing, therefore it cannot be defined, it cannot be pointed out to, it cannot be named. It's not a thing, it's nothing. So we see that in everything there's nothing. Nothing drives everything. Nothing brings about death. Nothing brings about these different versions of yourself. And no one can predict accurately their next version of themselves because they are not responsible for that. We fail to, with all these concepts and institutions that we have built, but we fail to predict the next occurrence. There was a tornado last week in KZN. Nobody could ever see that one coming. I can't even predict what my next meal. But yeah, anyway, thank you for listening. Let me end this podcast now. Thank you.